So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. My name is Autria Lindsay, and I'm with the Honor Bound Initiative. We have been working with the Moritz family to help bring attention to the ongoing issue at Ohio State University that is twofold in depriving students of the financial aid that is rightfully theirs. The first issue is the development fee that OSU is draining from multiple endowment funds each and every year. That money is being used to wine and dine other potential donors, as well as pay for the salaries of development officers at Ohio State University, as well as other OSU employees. The funds are also being so poorly mismanaged that many of them, hundreds of them, in fact, by our estimates, are actually underwater, meaning that they are worth less today than they were on the day that the donor gave the money to the university. The other issue is that some of these restricted endowments set very specific numbers of scholarships to be awarded every year. In the instance of the Moritz Endowment, 30 scholarships to the law school should be doled out annually. And yet that is not happening. In fact, in the case of the Moritz scholarships, we know that only between 12 and 15 of those scholarships are being awarded every year. So less than half of what the benefactor stipulated. Never have 30 scholarships been handed out in 1 year since the creation of that endowment fund. So not only is OSU siphoning money from these endowment funds in the name of a development fee to pay for their own lavish parties and socializing, but they are literally taking much needed financial aid away from deserving students. The university is actively and knowingly sending their own students deeper and deeper into financial debt, exacerbating the nationwide student debt crisis even further. So we are calling on current and former Moritz School law students to come forward and share their stories of being denied a scholarship, as well as encouraging former donors to speak up and share how their funds have also been mishandled by the OSU Development Office. We have tried repeatedly to work with the university, both through legal avenues and also a public affairs campaign, in order to right this wrong. We have invited a member of the OSU Development Office to join us here today and answer not only our questions, but the questions of the media as well. They have not only not been receptive, but they have actually fought us every step of the way. One thing to note is that at no point has any donor asked for 1 penny of their money to be returned. Rather, they are asking that the millions of dollars donated in earnest by these loyal alumni actually be used in the way that it was intended, to provide deserving students with a first-class education that they could not afford otherwise. So with that, I would like to introduce Jeff Moritz. He is the son of the late Mike Moritz, whom the law school is named after, and David Marburger, the Moritz family attorney. If you would like to ask any questions today, please go ahead and just type them up over in the comment section. Otherwise, we can get started with a couple of questions that were already submitted to us today. And Jeff, I think that the first one should be directed toward you, which is that how did you first realize that OSU was not holding up to its end of the deal?
It was in 2016. OSU provided my mother with a report, which surprisingly, that was the first report we had received on the 2001 donation. And that report showed that the $30.3 million gift had declined to, below 22 million, like $21.8 million. And at a time when, the stock market and the bond market were reaching all-time highs, it was unnerving to us to find out that this perpetual endowment was being spent away.
And so what has been the response from OSU so far?
Well, initially, they would give us a lot of reports that didn't make sense. They didn't add up. The numbers didn't add up. They finally admitted that besides the horrendous investment performance that their investment office was having, was this development fee that you mentioned that they were taking out every single year. And then we researched the investment contract, or the endowment contract that my father had entered into, and realized that there was no mention of a development fee, and asked them to to replenish the funds and work with us to try and figure out a way to ensure that the 30 scholarships you mentioned were actually would actually be provided. And the answer from Ohio State was, thank you for your concerns, but we're doing everything appropriate, and we're not going to change what we're doing. And since have sued my family to stop us from reopening my father's estate so that we can formally negotiate with Ohio State and or take legal action against them. And it's mind-boggling the amount of public funds that they are using to basically silence us and stop us from really enforcing what they had agreed to back in 2001.
And David, I guess the next question should go for you. Is anything that they're doing illegal?
Before I answer that, I want to supplement something Jeff said that I thought was astounding. Initially, in conversations that I had with legal representatives of OSU, the attitude conveyed to me was, hey, the parties to the endowment agreement are OSU and Michael Moritz. Jeff Moritz and his mother are not parties to that agreement. So, they have no standing to try to enforce that agreement or try to make us comply with the agreement. They have no more of a legitimate position to express than anybody off the street. So then when we sought to reopen Michael Moritz's estate to enforce the agreement Michael had with OSU and to appoint Jeff as administrator of the estate so that he could enforce it on behalf of his deceased father, OSU in effect sued us. OSU jumped into the litigation in ambush style and has been litigating for 3 years. I know they've spent more than up into six figures doing it. And this is just to keep Michael Moritz's estate closed. I think that's outrageous. It is sickening. Now your question about lawfulness.
Yeah.
No, development spending without the donor's consent is not lawful. Fact. That's a fact. That's not an issue about which reasonable minds can disagree. It is a fact. It's a legal reality. It's not lawful. If the donor consents to development spending, it's lawful. If the donor doesn't, it's not lawful. And we know of at least 2,000 endowment agreements where OSU is spending for what they call development, which is wining and dining wealthy alums, without the donor's consent. The donors have no clue that that's going on, other than what Honor Bound or the Moritz family is telling the people.
So where do things stand with the legal aspect of this right now?
Well, there's nothing happening with it. Now, I would have hoped that the Ohio Attorney General, we've made such a fuss about this. We've been making a fuss about this since 2016 to the Ohio Attorney General. The Ohio Attorney General knows all about this, and they're doing nothing except one thing. The Attorney General does one thing very significantly: fighting to the death to keep this estate closed. The Attorney General, like OSU, is fighting to keep the estate closed, spending its own staff attorneys' personnel time, and how much time are they putting in to investigating or pursuing enforcement of these endowment agreements that are being breached? Answer: zero, nothing. The Attorney General is doing nothing.
Jeff, back to you. This is something, as David just mentioned, that's been ongoing since 2016. Since you've started bringing this issue to light, what has been the reaction from other donors?
Shock, dismay. They can't believe that OSU is treating one of their largest donors in this way. The other donors are hopefully asking questions. They're very supportive. They're asking questions of Ohio State to say, is this happening with my fund? They, to 100%, have been extremely positive, have encouraged us to continue to ask questions, to fight for what is right. And in the end, we all want Ohio State to succeed. And Ohio State will only succeed if they honor the donors' wishes and stop raiding scholarship funds to pay for wealthy and entertaining wealthy donors.
Jeff, people do make the argument, just playing devil's advocate here, that your dad was on the board, that he was aware of this development fee, that again, he was on the board when this development fee was even discussed, the creation of it. What do you say to those people who say that there was no way that he did not know that this was in his contract agreement?
My father was a contract attorney. He did a lot of mergers and acquisitions, a lot of corporate contracts. He was extremely detailed oriented. If there was something, if he was aware that Ohio State could take out over 1% a year of his $30 million and use it for something that had nothing to do with the law school, he certainly would have asked to put that in the contract. There's no way any reasonable attorney would leave out a material fact. So it stretches the imagination to believe that he was aware of it. I can tell you that I'm positive he was not aware of it. But as David Marburger just pointed out, ours is just one of 2,000 other endowment contracts that have no language in about this development fee. So were all 2,000 of those donors aware of the fee? I can tell you they were not. And so, even if one of those people was aware of the fee, there's no way that all 2,000 other contracts were aware of it. It's just, and if it was so important to Ohio State to take this fee out every single year, then why didn't they put it in the contracts? Why did OSU leave it out if it's so important to them to take this money out of scholarship funds?
I'd like to supplement that because I think this argument that OSU makes is truly laughable. Let's assume, truly laughable, let's assume Michael Moritz knew all about the development fee. He was a partner in my law firm. Competent lawyer. He was not a public sector lawyer, though. His specialty was not entering into contracts with the public sector. That's not what he did. He was a private sector lawyer, which the rules are quite different there. But the point I'm making is this, and what's laughable about the OSU argument is this. Let's assume Michael Moritz knew all about the development spending. When you read the endowment agreement, every penny is accounted for. Every penny is allotted to some particular purpose. Not one penny is allotted to the development spending. What does that tell you? Let's assume that Michael knew all about this fee. He chose not to authorize it in his agreement. So it seems to me that the argument OSU makes actually is counter to OSU's purpose. His knowledge of the fee suggests, if overwhelmingly, that he didn't want the fee coming out of his endowment because he didn't make any room for it in the endowment. There's not one spare penny in that endowment agreement.
Right. Something that this has kind of uncovered, as both Jeff and David have looked into this a little bit more, is that your endowment fund is not the only one where it's been poorly mismanaged. In fact, as I mentioned, our estimates are that 100 of these endowment funds are underwater. Can you talk a little bit more about where Ohio State University ranks when it comes to the endowment performance?
Over the last 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, OSU's investment office has been in the bottom quartile of all university endowment funds nationwide. To have that poor of a performance over that long of a period is just, the odds of that happening are tiny. To have that kind of performance, you actually have to try to have that bad of a performance. And to the fact that the trustees of OSU are not stepping in and figuring this out is also just a lack of leadership. If OSU's football team finished in the bottom of all football teams nationwide for 20 years, you don't think these trustees would be, up in arms and doing something about it? But we're talking about real dollars here that OSU has not received millions, tens of millions of dollars every year for 20 years that they have wasted away, and these trustees have done nothing. It's mind-boggling that these trustees who are in charge of this university don't stand up and take action against this just horrendous performance. It's just, I just don't understand how the legislature or the public, the citizens of Ohio, the taxpayers, allow this to continue.
And this has actually led to them shutting down a portal where anyone can go on and search for the performance of any endowment. They've shut that down.
Yes, I mean, not only are they spending hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting to keep this quiet, to keep the Moritz family silent on this and not give them the legal recourse, but they are shutting down their website, which allows any donor to come in and see the balance of their fund and see how it's performing. They are so embarrassed about this situation that they would rather just not let anyone know this information. It's just, you know, it's public information, and for them to purposely take their website down so that no one can research it is, you know, that is just egregious.
And David, that was going to be
worse, because if I wanted to know about my endowment, I can't look it up.
right. Is that illegal?
No, it's not illegal.
Even though that should be public information?
It's not illegal. They don't have an obligation to put it on their website, but the fact that they are removing it, so I couldn't even monitor the performance of my own endowment is, again, not just egregious, laughable. It's laughable. They're hiding information instead of being transparent. Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
Because they're embarrassed. They're embarrassed of what they have done. And instead of trying to do the right thing and trying to do what's right for all these donors, they would rather just hide and prevent people from really understanding it. They would rather sue the Moritz family, one of their largest donors, as opposed to really doing what's right. And who in that university is making these decisions? Who's saying, well, let's just take down the website, and as opposed to let's try and figure out a way to solve this issue.
All right, those are all of the questions that I had that were submitted early. I realize that some of you are joining via telephone or cell phone, so I'm happy to unmute everyone. And if there is a question that you have, if you would like to ask Jeff or David, now is your opportunity. Feel free to ask away. Anyone? Okay. All right. Well, Jeff, David, anything that you guys would like to add that we didn't touch on?
Well, actually, this is a systemic issue in Ohio. It's not just Ohio State. Other public universities in Ohio are doing the exact same thing. So while we've identified thousands of restricted funds that are being raided every single year, this is happening at other public universities in Ohio. And it's time for the Attorney General of the state of Ohio, who in his charitable law division, to start enforcing the laws of the state of Ohio. It's time for our legislature to hold these universities accountable. And it's time for it's time for donors to start standing up, and it's time for these students. The students are the ones who are losing out, not just at Ohio State, but at Miami, Ohio University, all these universities. They're the ones who are not getting these scholarships because OSU is rating them. They need to stand up and start asking questions. Where's my scholarship? Why are you using scholarship money for something that has nothing to do with what the donor gave the money for? So, this is a problem in the entire state of Ohio. And I think our elected officials really need to stand up and take action against these universities.
I have something to add to that too. And I don't know if our listeners are aware of some of these facts, but the way this started was back in the mid 1990s when OSU needed a ton of money for what it calls development. Now it calls it advancement, but it used to be called development. Development meaning let's get let's bond with wealthy alumni to get them to provide endowments. And for those of you listening who don't know what an endowment really is, what it is that it's often provided by a wealthy alumni or by a foundation. But what it is a large sum of money that is not supposed to be spent. It's invested. And the earnings from that investment is what pays for the things that the endowment was created to do. So the earnings from the investment are used to provide, for example, the scholarships. That's how these things work. Well, OSU needed a lot of money to develop more of these endowments back in the mid-90s. And the administration came up with a plan. They didn't want to take the money out of OSU's everyday operating budget. And they didn't want to go to the legislature to ask for money to fund development. So one of the guys in the finance office decided, hey, we've got millions sitting here, millions of untouched money in restricted endowments we already have. Let's take it from there. And so they did. So they did. And they did it without alerting those donors that they were doing it. And, and they did it with the premise. They told the Board of Trustees of Ohio State University that, and I'll quote to you, in no case, they said, will the corpus of any gift be reduced. Well, that turned out to be completely false. They spend this money, they still spend this money once the ball got rolling. Once the ball got rolling, and this was easy money to get at, they didn't have to account to anybody for this spending, to anybody, because the legislature, it's removed from the legislature, it's removed from all oversight. The donors don't know what's happening because OSU isn't volunteering this information to the donors, so they just start spending. And who are they accountable? Who's OSU and the other universities that do this accountable to? Themselves. They are accountable only to themselves, and they've shielded their accountability from the public, from the donors, and from the legislature. Now, there's something wrong there. There's something really wrong there. Now, what's happening? What they do, and the way they justify this, is they say, well, what we're doing is good for OSU because we're growing the endowment. In other words, every time we entertain wealthy people, if they provide new restricted endowments, our aggregate endowment grows, and isn't that wonderful? What they don't say, and what they should say, is that in order to grow the endowments, they are cheating the scholarships and the other purposes of the other endowments. And when they grow the endowment, it doesn't replenish the money they've taken. It doesn't provide, it doesn't reimburse the other endowments for the scholarships lost. And there's a lot of student debt in this country or in this state that's caused by these practices.
Right. And David, I want to cut in there because we have less than 3 minutes here. But
Sorry.
Jeff,
Sorry.
who were the types of students that the Moritz scholarships were intended to benefit? And again, we have less than 3 minutes.
Well, my father wanted to bring the best and the brightest students to Ohio State to make them a good law school grade. And, he received a full scholarship at his time, and he wouldn't have gone to Ohio State had it not been for that scholarship. So he wanted other people like himself. He grew up very poor, and he couldn't afford law school. He wants to give other people who can't afford law school the opportunity to get a full ride so that they don't graduate with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And I think because they don't get these scholarships, it disproportionately affects low-income people because higher-income families can pay for the law school. It's the lower-income people who have to borrow money to go to law school. And so not getting the scholarship affects the lower-income student. And they just adds to this trillion-dollar student loan debt problem we have in society. It's just egregious. It's just egregious.
One last question here. If the Attorney General won't enforce endowment agreements, even though these are contractual agreements, then should the legislature pass legislation to demand it and to require it?
Oh, absolutely. As I said before, I think it's time for the legislators to start asking questions. And if these universities won't honor their contracts, then I think they need to step in and pass a law that prevents this kind of horrendous policy. and stand up for the students.
One more question. Do we have any idea the amount of money, how many taxpayer dollars have gone to fighting this, fighting against the Moritz family?
I mean, they have retained Boris Sater and in Columbus to sue us. And I can imagine that the fees that Boris Sater is charging the university over the last 3+ years to sue us. As David said, it has to be well over 6 figures. And again, the Attorney General, the amount of staff time that they're devoting to preventing us from reopening the estate, it's a significant amount of money. And I would say that all the money that they have spent would have paid for the Moritz scholars in the first place. I mean, isn't that to David's point, laughable that they're spending more money on legal fees to prevent the Moritz family from reopening the estate than they could have just spent on the scholarships to begin with. Again, what trustee is making this decision? How are they allowing the university to spend all this money to fight the Moritz family instead of just doing the right thing and giving these scholarships? It's journalism scholarships, it's engineering scholarships, it's business scholarships. It's happening throughout the university. It's not just the Moritz family. It's 2,000 other restricted funds. And for the trustees to allow the staff at Ohio State to fight this and where is the leadership? That's where I would like to know. Where is the leadership? What are these trustees doing?
All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, we are pretty much just about out of time. So Jeff and David, thank you both so much for your time today. Certainly appreciate it. And thank you all of the members of the media that have joined us on our call today. Hope that you got your questions answered. And if you did not, I hope you will reach out. We'd be happy to work with you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.